Welcome to the first meeting in the Motor Vehicles Committee. We're going to start off with a word of prayer, and if you join me, I'd appreciate it. Father, thank you so much for the day and another opportunity to come down here and do the people's work. I pray that we give us the wisdom to understand what these bills are about and the opportunity to penetrate the reasons for them and to make good law for the people of Georgia. Thank you for the blessing of life, and we praise you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Okay, first thing on the agenda is to adopt the rules. You'll find them in your folder, and since it's the first committee meeting, these rules are exactly the same as the ones we passed last time, and I don't think there's anybody new on the committee. So I think you're Jeff. I'm sorry, you're new on the committee. Okay. If you want to read through, why don't you start on page 5 and read back through the other direction. I'm sorry, Brian. That's right. Brian's down here. Welcome, anyway. Welcome to the committee. The reason that these rules are a little longer than what you'd normally find is because we decided to put a reference to all these special plates and how they're handled in the rules, and we get them every year, and that's the rules by which we'll handle them. I need a motion to approve the rules.
So moved.
Okay, second. All in favor? Aye. All right, they pass. Good. First one up today will be Mr. Tanner. Representative Tanner, why don't you come on up and tell us about 118. And we also have Michael Mitchell from Department of Driver Services. Welcome. Nice tie. I like that tie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I have Mike with me. This bill is brought on behalf of the Department of Driver Services, and this is a bill that's being brought. The reason for it is some changes in federal regulations that they have mandated that certain things be in code if we continue to get the federal highway money. So we're here today with those changes, and I'm reading from LC 390867. Mr. Chairman, I'll just go through and be glad to answer any questions anyone may have. First change is over on the second page, starting around line 30. This basically deals with any person who knowingly makes false information, conceals facts to get a driver's license. That's making a change and adding in to Title 40-5-125. That's adding a subsection C. And if you look over, when you look up 40-5-125 and you look at subsection B, you will think that anytime you commit B, you're also committing C, which criminally I think that's correct. But the reason that we've got those broken out is simply because there's a different length of suspension for someone to lose their commercial driver's license if they do one or the other. So that's why it's broken out separately. And then over around line 61, this deals with the department. The department currently and under this legislation can authorize other individuals, state agencies, private entities to be able to give driving tests and driving classes. And this is just adding some additional language there that the third party has to have a surety bond, and that surety bond has to be in the amount set by department regulations through their adopted regulations. And it has to be at least sufficient to pay for the retesting of a driver if it's determined that the examiner is engaging in fraudulent activities. So that's an additional requirement. It also requires that only the Department of Driver Services or the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators can certify examiners to administer the actual road skills test as specified by code. And that there'll be certain criminal history background checks and other things done on those individuals, and they'll be required to take a 4-year refresher course every 4 years. It also requires that down around line 75 and 76 that the individual who trains a driver, if you go take a commercial driving class, that same person who instructed you cannot also give you the test and certify you as a driver. Then down around lines 82 deals with, this is already in department regulations, but this is just codifying it. This deals with it. There'll be certain criminal history checks, commercial driver's information checks done on individuals who are applying for a commercial driver's license. Then down below that, dealing with currently you can go get your instructional permit, your commercial driver's instruction permit and then you can renew that basically unlimited number of times. What this does is states that once you get that, it's good for 180 days, 6 months. You can go in and renew that one time for a total of 1 year. And then after that, you have to retake the knowledge test and repay your fees so that you don't have individuals who just continuously just drive on the instruction permit. They've got to take, after that year, they've either got to repay or take the road skills test, which is ultimately what you're wanting to do, is to make sure they're a safe driver. Next section deals with the department shall issue the instructions permit to qualified applicants, and dealing with the fact that currently you can go in and you can take the knowledge skills test and the driving test the same day. So you can go in and get them all done at one time. There's a desire here through the federal regulations and the department to at least have a 14-day period in between the knowledge test and the driving test. Again, the whole idea of having the instruction license is that you go out with another driver who's qualified and you drive and get some time behind the wheel of a truck before you get a license and are able to do it on your own, and that's what that requires, is a 14-day waiting period. Also deals with issues relating to endorsements. You'll see 49 CFR Part 383.153B there. That deals with issues relating to endorsements. Under federal law, there are certain endorsements that you're allowed to get with a instruction permit. Certain ones you're not allowed to get, and those change from time to time, and that's why that code section is quoted there and listed. And this would determine, maybe a hazmat certification or an endorsement, that type of thing. Then on down in 126, lines 126, this deals with if someone violates the subsection B we talked about earlier, from fraudulent license or identification cards, false statements on applications. If they violate subsection B, then they would lose their ability to get their commercial driver's license instruction permit for a period not less than 60 days. And then if they violate subsection C, which we talked about earlier, that's being added in, then they would lose that privilege to get that driver's license for a period of 1 year. And then also in the next section, or in that same section, starting around 135, it deals with if the department gets information, they learn about information that a person has fraudulently obtained a driver's license, they're reviewing an application and they realize the person listed maybe someone else's social security number, the wrong date of birth, any type of information that they deem could be fraudulent, then they're going to send them notification. And that person has 30 days to come in and clear that up with the department. If they don't clear that up with the department, then they would lose their commercial driver's license in that time period. And then the next, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I'm going to skip over Section 5, the first part of Section 5, because that deals with the punishment for violating what is talked about in lines 205 through 212. Okay. This basically deals with requiring that if you're driving a commercial vehicle with your commercial license, that you cannot hold a telephone and talk on the telephone. You would have to do a wireless communication device that has voice commands. You can dial, but you have to just do a single button dial on the telephone. It also states that if you have to reach out of your seat, so that if you're trying to use the telephone or use a wireless telecommunication device and you're not able to stay seated in your seat with your seatbelt properly fastened, you can't get out of your seat and reach over while you're driving your commercial vehicle and do that. That would be a violation. Now, these are civil penalties, and that's what's in lines 183 through 188, dealing with the civil penalties that you're subjected to if you're caught violating one of these. The civil penalty not to exceed $2,750, and then the civil penalty if you're a company and the company has clear practices that they're allowing people and encouraging people and knowingly allowing their drivers to use telephones, handheld, to be able to get out of their seats while driving, that type of thing, and then it would be a fine on the company of not to exceed $11,000. So, Mr. Chairman, I know it's a comprehensive bill, and I went through it fairly quickly, but that's the bill, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, it was passed unanimously out of subcommittee.
Okay, are there any questions from the committee on House Bill 118? You've done a great job of explaining this. I mean, I got just a couple questions. Are all the provisions of the bill aligned with Federal Motor Carrier Act requests, or are there some departmental changes that are in here, combination of?
If it's all right, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Mike to answer that.
Great question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for hearing our bill today in your committee. Everything in this bill is in line with federal rule and reg. There's nothing in here that we're doing in terms of housekeeping or any changes.
Well, who set the penalties and things like that, the $11,000 and those numbers?
That's in the federal regulation.
That's in the federal
Yes, sir.
regulation. Okay, all right. Okay, and I assume that I assume the 14 days between the test and the driving test,
Yes, sir.
that's Federal Motor Carrier Act also?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
And I do have copies of the federal regulations. I'm happy to leave.
Oh,
that
I'd love
with
to read that tonight. All the years we've been doing this, it's, I don't think we've had one of these come back to bite us yet, but I'm sure there's going to be a first time for everything, so it is a pretty comprehensive bill. Is there anybody in the audience who wants to comment on the bill or speak up on it on behalf or against? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion on the bill.
Move to do pass.
Move to pass. Is there a second? Okay, all in favor of passage of House Bill 118, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank
You're
you,
on the
Mr.
rules there.
Chairman.
Representative Tanner, thank you so much. Okay. Representative Rogers, why don't you come on up and talk to us about House Bill 210.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you today, and I've asked Mr. Mitchell to stay up here because he's been involved with this bill. I present to you today House Bill 210. You should have in front of you the substitute, which is LC 390925S. And many times we say that it's a simple little bill, but this one really is. It's kind of changing code around a little bit. Just some quick history.
It's 0957S, is that what you said?
957 is?
Yeah, I've got the wrong one in front of me. I apologize. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
This is the substitute we're working
This is the
from,
substitute
right?
we're dealing with, right.
This is not the one that was passed out of subcommittee, correct?
Right. There was just one change.
We did pass by substitute.
We did?
We passed by substitute out of subcommittee. Yes, we added the word. I believe it was rehabilitation under the blindness
Yes.
Okay.
section.
Oh, go ahead.
Shall-
Go ahead
shall
with
we-
your explanation. So we're working on 0957S.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir. Basically, the way this bill came to be was I came out of a tragedy. Had a young lady in my district that came down with a disease this past summer, and during the course of that, she ended up needing a double lung transplant. She was 22 years old, and it piqued a lot of community interest. It piqued some interest in especially from my aspect, and I got to looking at organ donation in the state of Georgia, and contacted Mike Mitchell. And I'm going to give him full credit for this bill because he's the guy that caught this. It turns out that we have a number, of course, of organ donors in the state of Georgia that check off on their driver's licenses. But in the course of looking at that, and when I asked Mike for that information, he found that there had never been a provision made that if you come to get a state identification card, you fill out basically the same application as a driver's license, but code has never been changed to reflect that where you could be an organ donor or contribute to the blindness. So basically what this does is it simply puts the official state identification cards that are issued by DDS on the same level with the driver's licenses for organ donation. So that's what it does.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the explanation. I think it's a pretty clear bill. And any questions from the committee of Representative Rogers? Okay, turning the light on if that happens to bother you a little bit, just let me know. I don't see any questions. Anybody in the audience want to speak on the bill? Seeing none, I hear a motion.
Motion?
Second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good bill. Good
And
bill.
as
It's
a,
good
as
bill.
a side note, based on Mr. Mitchell's discovery, it looks like we can add close to 157,000 new organ donors in the state of Texas.
I've had some people come to me and say they're waiting for this this bill to be passed. I think that's a great bill. Thanks an awful lot for bringing it.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Well, we're going to move to House Bill 325. This is Representative Hitchens. If you want to bring that one up. Welcome there,
Good afternoon.
Representative Hitchens.
I appreciate it. I bring to you today House Bill 325. If you look at your paperwork, it's LC 390895. This is also the proverbial simple bill, but this is my third year working on it. It's,
We don't have, I'm sorry.
I don't think we have it.
We don't have that.
You don't have it?
No, sir, we don't have it in our packet.
Pardon?
Well, there wasn't a substitute.
There was not a substitute for that one. Well, I will say this.
Hold on for a second. So we're not.
This is the only impediment I run into with this. So.
I'm sure that's the case. I am sure that's the case.
But we were very kind in subcommittee, were we not?
You
there?
were. I appreciate it.
There we go.
Well, I'll tell you, why don't we do this? Why don't we have you explain the bill?
Okay.
And I think since the committee doesn't have the bill in front of them, we're going to have to either get it done. You've got one? 0895?
0895. Want to run out and make some copies? I saw somebody
Yeah,
else have a bill.
yeah.
When BJ Pack have a bill?
I think all the committee members ought to have one of the bills in front of them. Who doesn't have a bill? Who doesn't have it? Jeff? David?
Yeah, I have two.
All right. Osama, can you just make some copies of the substitute and then give them back? And
It's one of those rules of.
How many people don't have one?
let's make about 6 or 7 copies. That's fine.
I've got one now, so get me off your list.
All right. Hurry. Why don't you go ahead and explain the
Sure.
bill to us, and then we'll take whatever necessary action we have.
Okay, as I was saying, I first introduced this bill 3 years ago, and it went through public safety the last time, and got through the House with overwhelming vote. Went to the Senate, and I got it all the way through the Senate. About 5 minutes before it was to get to the floor, I had 2 bills together, and they tabled both of them. They brought the other one out about an hour later and passed it, but this one remained tabled. And last year I started over again in public safety in the Senate, and I couldn't get it through rules. But this is the simplest of bills. What it does is it changes the definition of passenger vehicles with regard to seat belts from 10 to 15 passengers. And what that does is it requires 15 passenger vans for anybody riding in a 15 passenger van to have their seat belt hooked up. It does give an exemption for those vans who are manufactured without seat belts prior to July 1st of 2015, so those that aren't made yet. And the reason for this is that these are the most unsafe vehicles statistically in the United States. 15 passenger vans are 3 times more likely to roll over in a single vehicle accident than any other vehicle on the highway. And if you're an unrestrained passenger in that vehicle, you're 3 times more likely to be a fatality than any other vehicle. These vehicles are primarily used for children, for church buses, daycare centers, boys and girls clubs, private schools. They have been prohibited from being used by the federal government in the public school system because of the danger. So the only other part of it that I haven't spoken to is it changes the fine from $15 for restraint to $50. And if they're not in a child restraint, children under 8 aren't in a child restraint seat, it changes it from $25 to $50.
Okay. Any questions from the committee of Colonel Hitchens?
I will only add that it was passed from subcommittee unanimously.
Okay. Let's just talk about the increase in the this has been a continuing controversy over a long period of time in terms of how much we charge for seatbelt violations. What prompts this doubling of the fine?
Well, this is an agency bill, and it was pretty much prompted by the agency.
Okay. Does the agency have, you guys can comment on this. I'll be happy to have you come on up and just sit with Bill and talk about this. Colonel?
Hey, Mark. Mark was my executive assistant for many, many years, so we have more than an average relationship here.
There's no conspiracy here, is there? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Why don't you take the microphone, will you, Colonel?
The fact of the matter is $15 has been around forever. If you drive in any small town and you see the sign, it says 91% seatbelt usage. And so that fine has had a particular effect. And then when you look at statistically where we're having our problems, it's particularly at night. Half of our fatalities occur at night. And of those fatalities, they occur because half of those folks aren't wearing their seatbelt. So that $15 fine on a large percent is not having the desired effect. When you look at what it takes the court systems to actually process the citation, it costs more than what they're collecting because as existing law is written, and as this one is written, the fine is the fine. You can't put any additional court costs on it. It's actually a very modest increase compared to what other states charge around the country. And so we feel that it puts a little bit more teeth and a little bit more seriousness into the penalty.
How many violations of seatbelt regulations are there?
Thousands. Tens of thousands.
Okay.
And the other part of that is if you've gotten a speeding ticket lately or any other type of moving hazard offense, you find out that the index for the fines have gone up substantially in the last 10 or 15 years. When I first got in this business, people who got speeding tickets were paying $35, $40. Now you may pay anywhere from $250 to $400 just for a minor speeding ticket.
Okay. All right. Chairman Yates has a question. You're number 22.
Just wanted to, for those that wasn't around when Speaker Todd Murphy was running things, I can tell you why it stayed $15. The Speaker didn't believe in it, and he got caught up in North Georgia, and he said it'll be $15, and it remained $15 with his tenure, and that's the way it happened. There's no logic to it, but he was the boss.
And nothing against him, but we never got the seatbelt law in pickup trucks passed until he left the legislature.
I seem to remember that. There's 26 down there. Oh, there, Jeff. Go ahead. Representative.
Can a driver be pulled over simply for a seatbelt violation, or is that definitely some of the cause?
No, they can be pulled over. Right.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Representative Hitchens? Anybody else want to speak on it? Jamila? Tell us who you are.
Jamila Pope with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. We fully support this bill. We know that seatbelts are the #1 countermeasure to preventing serious injuries and fatalities. We appreciate Representative Hitchens bringing this forward. This is a good bill. This will protect those kids between the ages of 8 and 18 and require them to be buckled up, which I believe has been an oversight in the past.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? All right.
I would like to say that in addition to the Department of Public Safety and Children's Health Care, that the Department of Public Health, the Georgia Municipal Association, the Governor's Office of Highway Safety, and National Highway Traffic Safety Administration all in favor of this bill.
I'm surprised that the Magistrate Courts Association is not in favor of this bill on your list either.
Well, there aren't that many of them. And the truth of the matter is these vehicles are nothing but sheet metal motors and seats, and they're top heavy, and they roll with the latest. They also recommend that you don't put anything on the roof and that you not carry over 10 people in them because they're so top heavy.
No, I think it's a serious issue. Everybody got a copy of the bill now? All right. If there are any questions on the bill, I see none. Hear motion on the bill. Is there a second? Now would be the time. Chairman Powell, give me your number. Your number is 18.
On line 25, strike the $50, go back to the original 15, and on line 37, do the same.
Is there a second to the amendment? Discussion? Is there a second to the amendment? It's a second to the amendment. Discussion on the amendment. Questions, Mr. Powell? Chairman Powell?
Be glad to take some questions, but I might like to make a comment.
Well, sure.
John was, Chairman Yates was somewhat right about the old days when we, once upon a time when we were doing the seatbelt violations, that was the most prevalent thing that gave probable cause to stop somebody. And it was always agreed on that because of these dollar amounts of the fines, that's one of the reasons that this is one of the very few fines that doesn't have all these add-ons. From the very words from Representative Hitchens, he said itself a minor violation is $200-300 for minor traffic violations. I would submit to you that that's what's wrong with that's one of the things that's created so much animosity towards a lot of our law enforcement folks. That folks think that every time they go get stopped, it's going to be a paycheck. And I would submit to you that, a $15 penalty is a $15 penalty. But if you go to $50, I mean, where do these monies go? Is it really going to make that much difference? I don't think it is. Most people have changed their behaviors and use a seatbelt for the biggest part. I mean, even I wear a seatbelt these days.
It's amazing.
Yeah. No, not amazing. It's just a matter of my
Okay.
health.
I'm sorry.
No problem. I'd ask for the committee to consider keeping the fine at the same amount.
Okay. All right. I'm going to
And
recognize Johnny.
they're different at the two different places. So you want to keep them the same as what they were.
Yes.
Johnny, go ahead.
I started to ask this before, but I didn't want to mess up. To be quite honest with you, but the question I was going to have to both of the colonels, and I know that it happens, if we increase this in any amount, is this going to cause the cities who rely on this for, and I know that they do, for a good bit of their revenue, to stop everybody that pulls out of the parking lot and before they put the seatbelt on?
Is this going to? I don't think this is a tremendous influx of money into any of the municipalities across the state. Even for $50, I think the thing that I hear the most animosity about is the $300, $350, $400 speeding tickets for running 15 mile an hour with a speed limit on the interstate highway, which is the safest highway in the country.
This would be the little fish, sir. Most folks that are attempting to raise revenue are using radar to do that. As you probably know, we're the folks that investigate those complaints, and that's where the abuse is. And I think they would stick, as Representative Hitchens, to that bigger fish, that bigger fine. This is a very, very small fine in comparison.
And you did say that there are no court costs added. With the current laws, there's no court costs added. It is what it is.
Yes, right.
Okay, we have another question here from, go ahead.
Yeah, either colonel, what's your, in light of the authorship of the bill, where do you stand personally on this fine issue?
I'm pretty ambivalent one way or the other. The thing I worry about the most is, public safety and the fact that most of these buses carry children. You know, I see it as an educational tool, and if we can get the youngsters to buckle up their seatbelts and the responsible adult. I've received all kinds of information from the daycare centers around the state about they support this and they want people to be required to do it. So we had a terrible incident here in Georgia about 20 years ago with a Department of Corrections vehicle, one of these vehicles that turned over down about I-75 at Tifton or Cordele and killed about 6 DOC employees that were unrestrained. And there's a case up in Canada where about 5 or 6 cheerleaders, and one in Oklahoma where there was 6 basketball players going to a basketball game that turned over. And you know, I'd just like to forestall through education anything like that from occurring here in our state.
Any other questions from the committee members? Anybody in the audience want to comment on this amendment? Okay, hold on a second. We got one down here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for running a little late, but is the purpose of the bill to bring a little more safety to the 11 now to 15 passenger vans, or is it to generate more revenue? Are we dealing with two issues here?
It's all about safety, but see, what we're doing is dealing with the bill before that had 10, it included up to 10 passengers.
Right.
This one just goes to 15 because these vehicles are so much more unsafe than the remainder of them. And the only reason you heard Colonel McDonough, I think, if you were here, explain why they were going up to $50 on just because of inflation and the court to take the time to deal with them, because they probably don't even $15 doesn't even pay for the court time. But it's not about money, not from our perspective. It's all about safety, particularly for children.
So and this question may have been asked, how many seatbelt ticket fines have we gotten, and do we have any data to tell us?
I'm sure we have some
is that like
somewhere, but I don't know what. It's thousands, but you know, I don't know that there's that many for children. Typically, in most vehicles where they're required, parents in their personal vehicles certainly require their children to be belted, just as a matter of safety.
Okay.
My children, when they get in the car, my grandchildren, if I back out, I got a little lane I go out of when I go, and if I don't have my seatbelt hooked up before I get to the paved road, they admonish me.
So the fine, increasing the fine is not as much of an incentive.
I'm ambivalent about the fine.
Yeah, right.
You know, I just think it ought to be an educational process, and I'd like to make sure that these children and these that are hauled around in these dangerous vehicles are safe, or safer.
Further question, Representative Powell, Chairman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, as I look and I hear what you're saying, but it is in fact a revenue generator. You're over tripling the price of a fine. One of the things we've always said in years of debate on these seatbelt violations, we always want to send a message. Most people will pay a $15 fine. They don't bat an eye to it, and it usually makes them mad enough, then they start buckling up, and it starts getting them. But if you start fining them $50 a lick, then all of a sudden the animosity that the average person has toward law enforcement and the system in general is, wait a minute, all they're doing, they're just gouging me for a little bit more money. And there's where I have concerns with this.
Of course, if we really wanted to do that, I think we ought to go to a statewide fine system with regard to everything, and where every city or county doesn't devise their own system, where you pay $500 for a violation in one county when you pay $200 for it in another.
I would agree with you, Colonel. I think let's just move on here. And there's a proposed amendment on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Any more I'm sorry. Could you repeat the amendment again? The amendment is to. Well, why don't you do that, Chairman Powell?
25, strike the $50 and strike the line out on 15. Go back to the original $15 fine. And do the same on line 37.
Revert.
Yes, go to 20.
I would suggest instead deleting lines 18 through 39 and revising line 8 to say revising subsection A, because we're not doing anything in A.
That's better.
That'd be fine.
Did everybody get that? Okay. What Legislative Council has suggested is that we take out everything under line 23, with the exception of line 41, section 2. So So 23 through 39 would be struck. That would leave the law as it currently is. And also on line 8, section E would be deleted. The word and E would be deleted. I get that right?
18 through.
Did I say what I say? I'm sorry, I meant 18. Yeah. So it's 18 through 39 are struck. And on line 8, we take off and E. Everybody got it? Okay, that's so now we're voting on the amendment. All those in favor of the Powell amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Going to show of hands. All those in favor of the amendment, raise their hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 to 5. The amendment passes. Now we're voting on the bill. All those in favor of House Bill 325 as amended will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Bill carries. Thank you, Representative Hitchens. Thank you, Colonel. Appreciate your comments. I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and do. Is 69 back yet? Is substitute 69 back yet? Let's get rid of a couple of other ones. I said get rid of. That's a bad term. Get rid. Can you imagine that? Get rid of. Why don't we do House Bill 169? Representative Spencer, you here someplace? There you go. Okay, Spencer. No, we're doing 169 right now. I'm sorry. Spencer, it's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for letting me be here.
You're doing this as a cameo appearance for Mr. Gravely.
That's right. So today, cut me some slack or not, depending on how you feel.
Oh, there's
about
no
it.
slack here.
This is House Bill 169. I have it listed on the paper given to me, LC 390832. Basically, it allows for the county tag agent to issue a temporary operating permit for a vehicle that doesn't pass its emission standards testing. Apparently, there's been some issues where folks will wait till the last minute to get their emissions tested, and their registration will expire after they've failed their test, and they don't have an opportunity to drive the vehicle around as needed. With the modern day vehicles, they have what's called the OBD computer systems, and you have to drive them for about 150 to 200 miles before they'll reset. So if they fail an emissions test, they have to drive the car around again for another 150, 200 miles before they can get the emissions checked again. And if they don't have their tag, they can't drive it around safely and without getting pulled over. This is supported by the Georgia Association of Tax Officials, and hope for your favorable consideration.
Okay. Questions of Representative Fry? No question. Anybody in the audience want to comment on the bill? See? All right. Representative Chairman Battles.
If in fact they fail the emissions test and they have to get a permit, is there any cost for that permit?
There's no cost for the permit in the bill.
I've been around now long enough. I'm about money.
Sure. No, I think that's a great question. It's not addressed in this legislation. So I would imagine, and I'm not as familiar with the way things operate on a local level, but that may be up to the county.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I asked the question, was those things that's not deliberate always ends up being left up to their discretion, and we come back and deal with it later. But it caught my eye, and I was just, would there be a fee for that temporary permit, and then when they come back to get their tag, is there an additional fee? It's a question.
That's a good question. Number 26, Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of a comment. I'm not opposed to the bill, but the business we're in, we do a lot of vehicle service, and your comment about the OBD devices and computers, part of those, what function of those devices is they allow the reset of those error codes that come up. So I would just question in terms of the reason for this bill because of an OBD reset issue. Again, not for the bill, but just a little clarification. I think the OBD devices themselves, part of that function is to reset error codes to make them go away.
And I would agree with you on that, except for stated from the tax commissioner in Douglas County, he talked about that they have to drive or else the reading that they get back will say it's called an OBD ready reading. And so apparently they can't get accurate information from when the time the emissions test fails to when it fixes, and they have to drive it for a little bit before.
So is this one of those situations where the computer system in the vehicle
Yes, sir.
has to recognize that the vehicle has been resolved and the issue's been resolved?
Yes, sir. I think the vehicle
Emissions.
would probably be gathering data to make sure that the vehicle has been fixed a certain way. And I drive an older car. I'm not too familiar with some of that technology, but and I did look on some websites that address this, and they all are pretty consistent in their language. Some said 100 miles before it would reset, and some said 150 to 200.
Thank you for the clarification.
Chairman Powell, do you have a question? I think you were lit up. That's fine.
I'm just sitting here reading this.
Okay. All right.
What do we have any idea what's going to be the cost involved to a county tax agent to issue these special permits? Is there printing costs? Is there labor cost? Anything like that?
No, sir.
There's no printing cost?
There will be. I'm sure there will be costs to be incurred, but that's not addressed in any of the legislation.
Did you say that the tag agents, the tax commissioners were in favor of this bill?
Yes, sir. This originated from the Douglas County Tax Commissioner, apparently having some issues with this, and then they said that the Georgia Association of Tax Officials was okay with this.
Okay. So they're out of compliance on the tag. They get pulled. Let's just go through the scenario. They get pulled over because their sticker doesn't represent the proper date and so on. And at that point in time, they've gotten something from the county that says they're okay, right? At least for that 30-day period.
Sure. I think what happens is you go in to get your, and this affects I think about 13 counties right now, where you have to get the emissions sticker and you go get your emissions checked probably real close to when your birthday is when you're supposed to get your tag done. And then you fail your emissions, you don't have time.
Right.
And
I think
you
you have
can't
the
get
sense
your
of
tag.
that. Yeah, right.
And so this gives an opportunity to offer a 30-day waiver to give them time to get the repair done, to make their schedule right, and to come back.
I think the sense of the bill is a good idea. The only questions really remaining, I think, are is there any cost associated with this? What you've told us is that the tax commissioners are in favor of this, and therefore they're willing to absorb that cost. Is there any reflection of this on the DES? It's not DDS actually. That registration is coming from DOR. Is there any representation of this on or need to represent this? I guess not, because you got that certificate. You get pulled over, you can show them that from the tax commissioner. Is that right? And it's all the non-attainment areas would be subject to this, I assume, because that's where the emissions are.
Right, and I think that to the biggest question is what are the fees going to be to get this? I think it plays out all right. It basically keeps. I think the ticket for not having an updated tag is what, $100-something as it is.
Okay. You want to comment on this, Mr. Royal, appreciate you coming up here today. It's good to see a happy face.
Thank you. My name's Richard Royal, and I represent the Georgia Association of Taxing Officials. They support this legislation wholeheartedly. They say that it puts the driver of this vehicle in a position of having to drive it illegally because they have jobs, they have works, they can't drive the car legally, and they're solely in support of this.
27.
Oh, I just wanted clarification because I'm from Douglas County and I heard you mention my commissioner. Are we clear that they're absorbing that cost?
And honestly, I do not know how the cost is being addressed from that particular office.
Richard, you want to comment on that? Do you know?
I just looked up the code quickly on there, and I didn't see any cost associated that talked about a cost. I don't know the answer to that, no, sir.
So they're not authorized to charge for this, and therefore there wouldn't be no charge, I assume, right? Or can they do it some other way?
I can't answer that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? I think it's a pretty good bill from the sense of the bill. I mean, I can understand why people would have this problem. On the issue of the cost, I suggest what you do. I'm going to move this bill on with the consent of the committee. But I'd suggest that before this bill gets to the Senate, the cost issue gets addressed, and that question be able to be answered before that happens, if you would.
Proper time.
Okay, entertain a motion.
So moved.
Mr. Powell, Chairman Powell makes a motion, seconded by Mr. Powell. All in favor of passage of House Bill 169, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Okay, you're good.
Thank you very much.
All righty. Let's go on here. Let's see. Pack is not going to do his. Chairman Powell, why don't we do 147?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have in front of you substitute 0959S, very simple bill. This would allow for the creation of a 2-year registration period, 2-year plate, instead of going each year. If you want to get a license plate and register your vehicle for a 2-year period, then you'd be able to double some money for the fee. So it's basically cost revenue neutral. It does not affect a prestige tag or anything such as that, and as the as the substitute states.
Any questions for Chairman Powell? So, the genesis of this is you buy a new car, you get 2 years before you have to go through an emissions check anyway, right? So you can get, for the committee's benefit, we've had bills in the past that have offered the opportunity for 3, 4, and 5-year tags across the state. Problem with that is the emissions check that they would have to do. This one doesn't affect that. 2-year tag is well within the scope of what we're trying to do.
I think any vehicle goes more than 1 year anyway. Somebody would have to be better versed about emissions than I would be.
Maybe. Well, look, there's no question. Anybody in the audience want to? Okay. All right. Bid on battles.
Is there a cost? Does it cost more? Did I miss something? For $40 for a 2-year.
$20 for 1 year.
Okay,
$40 for 2.
I found it.
Revenue neutral.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions? I don't see any other questions. Anybody in the audience have any discussion of the bill? Fine. I'll entertain a motion. There's due pass. A second on it. Okay. All in favor of passing HB 147? That signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Like sign. Thank you, Mr. Powell. Appreciate that. Mr. Pack had a bill, but he has, I think he's got to chair another committee. Craig?
Yes, he's withdrawn.
He's withdrawn for the day? All right. The committee's going to reconvene on that bill the next time we meet. That's an important bill from the standpoint of our international license opportunity. But at this point in time, there's a substitute to House Bill 69. Representative Spencer is going to bring that to us as the last bill of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. At the request of Legislative Council, I'm bringing a substitute Really, there's no substantive change to the bill that passed out of subcommittee.
Just give them the number.
House Bill 69, excuse me.
And the sub is?
And the substitute that Ledge Council recommended was LC 390949 ERS. And essentially, the changes are stylistic in nature. It doesn't change the substance of the bill. It was passed out of subcommittee. So I just wanted to make sure those that did read the first bill, it really didn't change that much at all. It's just stylistic, so we can fit it in our code more appropriately. That was on the recommendation. So essentially what the bill does, it is what I call the Motor Vehicle Event Data Recorder Act, and it restricts access to information captured by event data recorders. These are essentially black boxes, if you will, that record data in motor vehicles. It records things like speed, steering performance, brake performance, airbag deployment, and seatbelt use. And majority of vehicles in the United States are equipped with these recorders, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has advocated for making them mandatory. This act will clarify the information that is captured by these recorders or event data is the property of the owner. That's essentially what the premise of the bill is that the data belongs to them. Thus, event data can be accessed by other parties if involved. The owner of the vehicle, and the way I've written this bill is to essentially consents to the release of that information. The data is subject to an order or discovery in law enforcement investigations or judicial administrative proceedings, and also the data would facilitate the delivery of emergency medical care for occupants of the vehicle, and we have provisions in the bill that deal with those. This act also prohibits other parties from releasing the event data unless the owner actually, or the vehicle actually consents to that agreement. There's other things in here like subscription services like OnStar. As long as we do not interfere with the contract agreement with subscription services like OnStar, if they sign that agreement, the consumer does, then that's part of that agreement there, and we do not interfere with that with this bill. So, and finally, the bill makes it a misdemeanor for a person knowingly to obtain the event data in violation of these provisions that are in the bill. And that's the substitute in essence. So if you have any questions, I'm glad to take them now, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, questions from the committee? All right, Representative Caldwell.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the same question that I did in subcommittee. What's the purpose of this bill? We got a problem?
Well, the problem that has arisen is the National Highway Safety folks, they have come up with regulations to require these event data recorders in motor vehicles. And so now there's not a national standard as to who actually owns the vehicle. Congress has not, vehicle data in the recorder. So Congress has not set a standard for that, and so now what you're seeing is states, about 15 states have passed legislation to address this issue to make sure that it's clear that the owner of the vehicle is the rightful owner of the data. That's why I'm bringing this legislation.
But I mean, this is not any agency bill, DPS, anybody else. Then you say you just had a constituent that was concerned about it in your area.
Right. The motivation behind the legislation, I had a constituent that's been concerned about privacy issues regarding these event data records for about a couple of years, and I just haven't had time to actually put in a bill to address that, but I committed to him this year that I would do so, and that's what I'm doing today.
Okay. Let's see. There's number 2 down there. Okay, Representative Prince.
My question is companies, once say of an accident, this prohibits them from using that data? And then the follow-up question, what about manufacturers as they try to improve their products? Are they able to use this data as well?
In the event of a crash system, if they do crash, if it's part of the insurance policy's agreement with the owner, they can actually release that data under those conditions, as long as our bill doesn't interfere with that contract agreement with the insurer and the owner of the vehicle. Likewise with safety data, but the safety data can be released if there's an investigation of a crash, and that can be easily done in this bill.
And so manufacturers, they can't get this data?
They would have to consent to if they wanted the data directly, they would have to have an agreement somewhat with the owner. But the premise of the bill is that the owner owns that data.
Thank you.
David, is that you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
How many states currently have passed this legislation, number one? And number two, is there any federal legislation governing the ownership of the information that's currently in those black boxes?
Like I said with Representative Caldwell, there's about 15 states that have legislation governing who actually owns the data. So that's the answer to the first question. The second question is Congress, that the federal government has not written any legislation to determine, to go and coincide with this federal regulation to require these event data recorders. So they haven't taken a national standard yet. And so that's why you're seeing the states trying to clarify, okay, whose data is this and who does it belong to? And it is the owners, in my view, and I agree with that. And that's what these states are doing.
Thank you.
Representative Alexander.
So I know you mentioned the one constituents, but are there other situations or other circumstances where there's been owners that an incident occur and they didn't receive the information? Or I guess I'm trying to find out what other incidents do you have other than your one constituent?
Well, I mean, the issue here is about who owns the data. That's what really the premise is of the bill. Should this data be given to insurance companies so they can raise your rates for whatever reason without the knowledge of the owner? That's a concern. Should, this data can be easily captured with other technologies and other applications. They're even now getting to the point where they're trying to make where cars can actually talk to each other on the road using some of these recordings. And a lot of the technology out there, it's easy to capture some of this data. So the concern is privacy, and the concern is just to make sure that the owner of the vehicle is actually the one who actually owns the information, and so that's not disseminated indiscriminately. That's the concern.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing none. From the audience, anybody out there who wants to comment on this bill? Okay. So so basically, just in summary, this is a privacy bill.
Correct.
Apparently there's not a lot of data to support. Let me ask you a question about this. Do the automobile dealers, when you go in for an oil change or something like that, do they have access to this event data recorder, and do they use it for other maintenance functions?
I would think they would have access to it. I mean, it's part of the car's requirement.
So
I haven't actually asked that question, but
okay.
I would see it would stand to reason that they do.
So by contracting for your oil change or whatever service you've got from them, are you effectively giving them the opportunity then to use the data in the?
Well, as long as I don't, in this bill, I do not interfere with any contractual agreements. If the owner is in an agreement with a maintenance, an auto maintenance company or OnStar or subscription service like that, those things are included in their agreements, and that was what would be governing that is a contract. Basically, what I'm stating here is a policy position that the owner is the actual owner, or the vehicle is the owner of the data.
So it doesn't restrict other access, except you have to give a purposeful statement as to why you're in agreement with that.
An agreement, yes.
And you believe that a contract.
Yes, and I addressed that here in the bill twice, and I've addressed the concerns of those that have come to me and asked me to put this language in there, and I've done that just to put belts and suspenders in the bill, just to make sure that we address their concern that government is not interfering with a contract between consumer and provider of the service. So that's lines 58 and lines 77 where we discuss those subscription terms.
Okay, that's a subscription agreement. This would be the OnStar.
Right. Things like OnStar or other telecom company and things like that.
Is there anything in here that deals with a specific contract or circumstance where somebody's having routine maintenance done of one type or another and they have to use the event recorder? Is there something in here you can point to that discusses that issue?
Not specifically that, just subscriptions.
That's the only thing?
Right. And if you look at, let's see, which things that can be retrieved, who can retrieve this? Event data can be retrieved, obtaining by use of the person who is not the owner of the vehicle. and that starts at lines 40, and it's the owner of the vehicle or the agent consents to retrieval of the data. The event data can be retrieved by the motor vehicle dealer. Excuse me, it is in there.
Okay.
Vehicle manufacturer or automotive technician and service repair
I
upon
got it.
request. They would have to request that.
Okay.
So that's an agreement.
Okay.
So I did
All right.
address that. Sorry.
Representative Caldwell.
I was going to ask that question that you just asked, Mr. Chairman. What was concerning me, when most folks take their vehicle to